Grant Solen had always believed that procurement managers were invisible people. We negotiate million-dollar contracts, manage vendor relationships that could make or break entire departments, and somehow remain completely overlooked at company parties. Which was exactly how I preferred it, until my wife decided to make me the star of her own twisted reality show. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. It was a Tuesday evening in Minneapolis when everything started falling apart. I was sitting in my home office reviewing supplier contracts for the quarterly review when Nola burst through the door with that particular brand of fake enthusiasm she'd been perfecting lately. "Grant, honey, the girls are coming over for wine night," she announced, not really asking for permission. At 36, Nola Vero still carried herself like the sorority president she'd once been, all blonde highlights and calculated charm. "We'll be in the living room, so maybe you could work somewhere else." I looked up from my laptop. "It's my house too, Nola." "Our house," she corrected with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "For now." That phrase had been creeping into her vocabulary more frequently. For now. Like our 12-year marriage was some kind of temporary arrangement she was reconsidering. Maybe it was. I gathered my papers and retreated to the kitchen, where I could still hear everything through the thin walls of our suburban Minneapolis home. Nola worked as a fundraiser for a local nonprofit, which meant she was professionally trained in manipulation, a skill that apparently transferred well to personal relationships. Her friends arrived like a pack of wolves in designer clothing. Owen Favren, married to Owen, a tech consultant who thought his MBA made him God's gift to business strategy. Tara Mitchell, whose husband had left her 6 months ago for reasons that were becoming clearer by the day. And Jade Chen, a social media manager who treated real life like content for her Instagram stories. The wine flowed, and so did the conversation. I tried to focus on vendor performance metrics, but their voices carried easily through the house. "I swear Owen is so much more attentive than he used to be," Nola was saying, and something in her tone made me stop typing. "He really listens when I talk about work stress." Raina laughed. "That's sweet. He's been working late a lot lately, but I'm glad he's being supportive with his friends." The silence that followed was loaded with meaning I didn't want to understand. "Speaking of work," Jade chimed in, clearly changing the subject. "How's Grant's job going? Still pushing papers around?" "Procurement management," Nola said with the kind of dismissive tone she usually reserved for telemarketers. "He makes sure we get the best prices on office supplies and computer equipment. Very stable." The word stable came out like she was describing a particularly boring breed of dog. "Stability is good," Raina offered diplomatically. "Is it, though?" Nola's voice had taken on that wine-loosened quality that usually preceded her most honest observations. "I mean, Owen's always talking about expansion opportunities, new ventures. Grant's been doing the same job for 8 years. I closed my laptop quietly. 8 years of building vendor relationships, negotiating contracts that saved my company hundreds of thousands annually, managing supply chains that kept entire departments running. But sure, Nola, office supplies. "Well," Tara said, "at least you know where you stand financially." "Do I?" Nola laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately. What I'm really entitled to, you know? What I've earned." My pressure started climbing. Entitled to what, exactly? The house we'd bought together? The savings account I'd been contributing to for over a decade? The life we'd built while she spent money faster than her nonprofit salary could justify? "You've been married 12 years, Jade pointed out. "That's got to count for something in a divorce settlement." Divorce settlement. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Exactly," Nola said, her voice gaining confidence. 12 years of supporting his career, managing the household, being the perfect corporate wife, that has value." I wanted to laugh. Supporting my career? Nola had missed more company events than she'd attended, usually claiming she was too busy with her own work. Managing the household? Our 12-year-old son Milo did more around the house than she did. Plus, she continued, there's the emotional labor. Do you know how exhausting it is to pretend you're happy with someone who has no ambition, no passion? The kitchen felt like it was shrinking around me. 12 years of marriage, and this was how she really saw me, as some passionless drone she'd been pretending to love. "So what are you going to do?" Raina asked quietly. "I'm thinking about it," Nola said. "Really thinking about it. I deserve better than this half-life I've been living." Half-life. Like I was some kind of radioactive material slowly decaying in her presence. I heard the sound of wine glasses clinking, like they were toasting to my upcoming destruction. The conversation moved on to other topics, vacation plans, work drama, complaints about various husbands, but I couldn't focus on anything else. After they left, Nola came into the kitchen where I was still sitting in the dark. "How long were you listening?" she asked. "Long enough," I said. She didn't apologize, didn't try to explain or take back what she'd said. She just shrugged and started loading wine glasses into the dishwasher. "We need to talk," she said finally. Apparently we do. But we didn't. Not that night. Instead, we went to bed in silence, lying on opposite sides of our king-sized mattress like strangers. I stared at the ceiling, listening to Nola's breathing even out as she fell asleep, and wondered when exactly my wife had started planning my exit from her life. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. A note on the kitchen counter said she had an early meeting with donors. Milo was already at school, and I was alone in the house that apparently wasn't really mine anymore. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, looking around at the life I thought I'd been building. The mortgage payments I'd been making for 8 years, the furniture we'd picked out together, the family photos that suddenly felt like evidence of a crime I didn't know I'd committed. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily Rodriguez, my closest friend at work and one of the few people who'd seen through Nola's act from the beginning. "Coffee before work? You sound like you need it." Emily was 38, worked in HR, and had a talent for reading people that made her invaluable in her job and dangerous as a friend. She'd been divorced herself 3 years ago and had emerged from the experience with a cynical wisdom that I was starting to appreciate. We met at our usual spot, a coffee shop downtown that catered to the morning rush of corporate workers. "You look like hell," Emily said by way of greeting. "Thanks. That's exactly what my ego needed to hear." She studied my face over her latte. "What happened?" I told her about the wine night conversation, about Nola's casual discussion of my shortcomings and her apparent interest in divorce settlements. Emily listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. "How long has this been going on?" she asked when I finished. "The dissatisfaction? Probably years. The planning? I'm not sure. Grant, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about the answer." I nodded. "Has Nola been traveling more for work lately? Working late? Taking calls in private?" The question hit me like a punch to the stomach because the answer was yes to all of the above. You think she's having an affair. I think she's acting like someone who's having an affair. The question is whether you want to know for sure. Did I? Part of me wanted to keep living in ignorance, to pretend that my marriage was just going through a rough patch that we could work through with counseling or a vacation or whatever it was that normal couples did. But the other part of me, the part that had spent years learning to spot inconsistencies in vendor contracts and supplier relationships, was already putting pieces together. "What would you do?" I asked. Emily's smile was sharp. I'd find out exactly what I was dealing with before I made any decisions. Knowledge is power, Grant. And right now, she has all of it. She was right. Nola was planning something, and I was sitting around feeling sorry for myself while she got her ducks in a row. That wasn't just stupid, it was dangerous. How do I find out? Carefully, quietly, and with documentation? That afternoon, I started paying attention. Really paying attention. Nola came home from work 2 hours later than usual, claiming she'd had dinner with potential donors. Her phone buzzed constantly throughout the evening, and she took every call in another room. When I asked about her day, her answers were vague and rehearsed. Over the next week, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Late nights, mysterious phone calls, and a sudden interest in our financial situation that included questions about my retirement accounts and the current value of our house. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening when Nola left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she took a shower. I wasn't snooping, not exactly. The screen was facing me, and I could see her email inbox without even moving. Most of the messages were work-related, but one subject line caught my attention. Hotel confirmation, Minneapolis Marriott. I glanced toward the stairs, heard the shower still running, and made a decision that would change everything. I clicked on the email. The reservation was for the previous weekend, when Nola had claimed to be at a fundraising conference in Duluth. 2 guests, 2 nights, premium suite. The billing information showed it had been paid for by Owen Favren. Owen, Raina's husband, the tech consultant who'd been so attentive to Nola's work stress. I took a photo of the screen with my phone just as I heard the shower shut off. By the time Nola came downstairs, I was reading the newspaper like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. My wife was having an affair with her best friend's husband, and they were stupid enough to leave a paper trail. I texted Emily immediately. "We need to talk. Tonight." Her response was immediate. "My place. Bring everything." Emily's apartment was a study in organized efficiency, clean lines, neutral colors, and not a single item out of place. It was the home of someone who'd learned to depend only on herself, and tonight it felt like a war room. "Show me," she said before I'd even sat down. I pulled out my phone and showed her the hotel confirmation. Emily studied it with the focused intensity she usually reserved for employee misconduct investigations. "Owen Favren," she said. "Isn't that Raina's husband, the one from Wine Night?" "The same, and get this. Nola told me she was at a fundraising conference in Duluth that weekend." Emily's expression darkened. "So she's not just cheating on you, she's betraying her best friend too?" "Apparently." She handed my phone back and walked to her kitchen, returning with 2 beers. "Grant, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about an affair anymore. This is about someone who's been systematically lying to everyone in her life while planning to take you for everything you're worth." I took a long drink of beer, trying to process the magnitude of what we'd discovered. "What do I do?" "You get smart. Fast." Emily sat across from me, her expression serious. "Nola's been planning this for months, maybe longer. She's got her friend group convinced that you're some kind of extra weight she's been carrying. She's establishing a narrative where she's the victim and you're the problem. But the affair? The affair gives us leverage, but only if we handle this right. If you confront her now, she'll deny everything and accelerate whatever timeline she's working on. We need more evidence, and we need to be strategic about how we use it." Emily was right. My instinct was to march home and throw the hotel confirmation in Nola's face, but that would accomplish nothing except giving her time to cover her tracks and prepare for battle. So, what's the plan? First, we document everything. Every late night, every mysterious phone call, every inconsistency in her story. Second, we protect your assets. You need to talk to a lawyer immediately, not to file for divorce, but to understand your options. Third, we wait for the right moment to act. "What's the right moment?" Emily's smile was predatory. "When she thinks she's won." Over the next 3 weeks, I became a different person. The passive husband who accepted Nola's excuses and explanations disappeared, replaced by someone who paid attention to details and documented everything. I started with the obvious stuff. Nola's work schedule, which I cross-referenced with her organization's public calendar. She'd claimed to work late on 6 different evenings when her office had hosted no events and scheduled no meetings. Then there were the phone calls. Nola had always been social, but the frequency and secrecy of her recent conversations was unprecedented. She'd step outside to take calls or disappear into our bedroom, always returning with vague explanations about work drama or friend problems. The financial evidence was the most damning. I had access to our credit card statements, and the pattern was clear once I knew what to look for. Restaurants she'd never mentioned, charged during her supposed work meetings, a spa day that coincided with one of Owen's business trips to Minneapolis, even a jewelry store charge that had resulted in earrings I'd never seen her wear. But the smoking gun came from an unexpected source, our 12-year-old son, Milo. I was driving him home from soccer practice when he casually mentioned seeing his mom at the mall the previous Saturday. "That's nice," I said, not thinking much of it. "Did you guys go shopping together?" "No, I was there with Tommy's family. Mom didn't see me. She was with some guy I didn't recognize." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What did the guy look like?" "Tall, dark hair, kind of old, like you." They were holding hands. Nola had told me she was spending that Saturday at a work retreat. Another lie, another piece of evidence. That evening, I called the lawyer Emily had recommended. Sarah Martinez was a family law attorney with a reputation for being thorough and ruthless. Exactly what I needed. "The good news," she told me after reviewing my documentation, "is that Minnesota allows for fault-based divorce. Adultery can impact property division and spousal support. The bad news is that we need to be absolutely certain before we make any moves." "How certain?" "Photographs, witnesses, irrefutable proof. Right now, you have suspicious behavior and financial records that suggest an affair, but nothing that would hold up in court if she decides to fight dirty." "And you think she will?" Sarah's laugh was bitter. "Mr. Solen, in my experience, people who are capable of conducting long-term affairs while planning divorce strategies are absolutely capable of fighting dirty." I left her office with a clear understanding of what I was up against. Nola wasn't just cheating, she was planning a complete financial and social destruction. The conversations with her friends, the questions about our assets, the establishment of herself as the wronged party. It was all part of a larger strategy. But I had advantages she didn't know about. I had documentation she wasn't aware of, legal advice she hadn't anticipated, and most importantly, I had Emily. "Time for phase 2, Emily said when I updated her on the lawyer meeting. "We need to know exactly how deep this goes." "What do you mean?" I mean, we need to know if Owen is the only affair or if there are others. We need to know what Nola's been telling her friends about you, and we need to know what her timeline is for making her move. Emily's plan was elegant in its simplicity. She would reach out to Owen Favren under the pretense of organizing a surprise birthday party for Nola. It was a perfectly reasonable excuse for asking questions about Nola's recent behavior, her mood, her plans. The conversation, which Emily recorded with Raina's unknowing consent, was devastating. Nola's been so much happier lately, Raina had said. I think she's finally ready to make some big changes in her life. What kind of changes? Well, she hasn't said anything specific, but she's been asking a lot of questions about my divorce attorney. You know, hypothetical questions about property division and custody arrangements. That's concerning. Is everything okay with Grant? Raina's pause spoke volumes. I probably shouldn't say anything, but Nola's been pretty open about feeling trapped. She says Grant has no ambition, no passion for anything except his boring job. She's worried about spending the rest of her life with someone who's already given up on living. The recording continued for another 10 minutes, with Raina unknowingly providing a detailed account of Nola's complaints about our marriage, her financial concerns, and her apparent timeline for making changes, which seemed to be accelerating towards some kind of action before the end of the year. But the most interesting revelation came at the end of the conversation. I just hope she's careful, Raina had said. I know she's been spending a lot of time with Owen lately, getting advice about business opportunities. I'm glad my husband is being supportive, but I worry about appearances, you know? Emily and I listened to the recording 3 times, picking apart every detail. She has no idea, I said finally. None at all. Raina thinks her husband is being a good friend to Nola. She has no clue that they're having an affair right under her nose. So, what do we do with this information? Emily's expression was thoughtful. We wait, and we prepare for the moment when Nola makes her move. That moment came sooner than expected. It was a Friday evening in November when my world exploded. I was in my home office reviewing quarterly vendor performance reports when my phone rang. Nola's name appeared on the screen, but something about the timing felt wrong. She was supposed to be at another wine night with her friends, a weekly tradition that had become increasingly frequent and increasingly secretive. I answered on the 3rd ring. Hey, what's up? Grant. Her voice was different, a confident, almost triumphant. I need to tell you something. There was background noise, the sound of multiple conversations and clinking glasses. She was definitely with her friends, and from the volume level, I could tell she had me on speakerphone. Okay, I said carefully. I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about our marriage, about what I want for my future. My heart started pounding, but I kept my voice steady. And? I'm filing for divorce, Grant. I'm done pretending to be happy in this marriage. I'm done settling for a half-life with someone who has no ambition, no passion, no drive. There was laughter in the background, her friends encouraging her, celebrating her announcement. I could picture them sitting around Jade's living room, wine glasses raised in a toast to my destruction. I see, I said. I want you to know that I'm not trying to be vindictive, Nola continued, her voice taking on that fake reasonable tone she used when she was about to say something particularly cruel. But I've invested 12 years of my life in supporting your career and managing our household. I think I'm entitled to half of everything we've built together. More laughter from her audience. Someone, it sounded like Tara, called out, You tell him, girl. Half of everything, I repeated. That's right. The house, the savings accounts, your retirement fund, half of everything, Grant. I've earned it. The laughter was louder now, more confident. I could hear Jade making comments about finally getting what you deserve, and Tara adding something about men who don't appreciate what they have. This was it, the moment Emily and I had been preparing for. Nola thought she was delivering a devastating surprise attack, backed by her supportive friends, catching me completely off guard. She had no idea that I'd been documenting her affair for weeks, that I'd already consulted with a lawyer, that I knew exactly what she'd been planning. But there was something else I knew that she didn't, something that was about to turn her moment of triumph into a complete disaster. I took a deep breath and played my ace. Is Raina laughing? I asked quietly. The background noise faltered slightly. What? Nola's voice was less confident now. Raina, is she laughing with everyone else? Does she know you're taking her husband too? The silence that followed was absolute. Not just quiet, completely, devastatingly silent. I could picture the scene. Nola frozen with the phone in her hand, her friends suddenly realizing what I just said, and Raina Favren, Owen's wife, Nola's supposed best friend, slowly understanding the implications of my question. Grant, what are you talking about? Nola's voice was shaking now. I'm talking about your affair with Owen. I'm talking about the hotel receipts, the restaurant charges, the weekend trips that Owen paid for while you told me you were at work conferences. I'm talking about the fact that while you're sitting there with your friends, planning to take half of my assets, you've been screwing over your best friend for months. The silence stretched on. I could imagine Raina's face, the pieces falling into place, Owen's late nights, his business trips, his sudden interest in Nola's work problems. Raina, I said into the phone, are you there? Did you know that your husband has been having an affair with Nola? Did you know that those business trips to Minneapolis were actually romantic getaways? Did you know that while you've been supporting Nola through her marriage problems, she's been sleeping with your husband? What happened next was chaos. I could hear voices raised in shock and anger, the sound of chairs scraping against the floor, someone, probably Raina, screaming Owen's name. There was the crash of something breaking, possibly a wine glass, and then Tara's voice saying, "Oh my God, Raina, I had no idea." Nola was trying to regain control of the situation. "Grant, you're being ridiculous. You're making things up because you're upset." "Am I?" I interrupted. "Should I read you the hotel confirmation email? The one from the Marriott downtown, paid for by Owen Favren? The one from the weekend you told me you were in Duluth?" More chaos in the background. Raina was crying now, and I could hear her demanding answers from someone, probably Nola, who was clearly struggling to explain herself. "Or maybe," I continued, "I should mention the restaurant charges on Owen's credit card that match up perfectly with your supposed work dinners, the spa day you took while I was watching Milo, the jewelry he bought you that you've been hiding." "Stop," Nola said, but her voice was weak now. "The best part," I said, warming to my theme, "is that you thought you were so smart. You thought you had everything planned out. Turn your friends against me, establish yourself as the victim, then take me for half of everything I've worked for. But you were so focused on destroying me that you forgot about the collateral damage." I could hear Raina in the background, her voice breaking. "How long? How long has this been going on?" 12 years of marriage," I said into the phone, "and this is what it comes down to. You're not just a cheater, Nola, you're a betrayer. You betrayed me, you betrayed your best friend, and you betrayed your own son." That last part hit home. I could hear the sharp intake of breath from multiple people. "Milo saw you," I continued. "Not at the mall, holding hands with Owen. Your own son watched you cheating on his father, and he didn't even understand what he was seeing." The background noise was getting louder. Multiple conversations, people taking sides, the sound of the evening completely falling apart. "I have to go," Nola said suddenly. "No, you don't," I said. "You wanted to have this conversation on speakerphone with your friends listening. Let's finish it." "Grant, please. You want half of everything? Here's what you're actually getting. You're getting a fault-based divorce where your adultery is documented and witnessed. You're getting a custody battle where your affair and your lies are part of the public record. You're getting the social consequences of betraying your best friend and destroying her marriage." I paused, letting that sink in. "But most importantly, Nola, you're getting exactly what you deserve." The line went silent. She'd hung up on me, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. My phone immediately started buzzing with text messages. The first was from Emily. "Please tell me you recorded that call." I had. Emily had insisted on it weeks ago, and Minnesota was a one-party consent state. The second message was from an unknown number. "This is Raina. We need to talk." The third was from Nola. "You've ruined everything." I set the phone down and leaned back in my chair. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The secret was out, the lies were exposed, and Nola's carefully constructed plan was in ruins. But I knew this was just the beginning. Nola would regroup, probably hire a lawyer, and try to salvage whatever she could from the wreckage. The real battle was just starting. My phone rang again. This time it was Emily. "Holy shit," she said without preamble. "Please tell me that went as well as it sounded." "Better," I said. "Raina had no idea. None of them did." "So, what happens now?" I looked around my home office at the vendor contracts and performance reports that Nola had always dismissed as boring. The same attention to detail that made me good at my job had just saved my marriage, or at least saved me from getting destroyed in the divorce. "Now," I said, "we go to war." The aftermath of that phone call was swift and brutal. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Word was spreading through Nola's social circle like wildfire, and the reactions were exactly what I'd hoped for. Raina was the first to reach out directly. We met at a coffee shop downtown the next morning, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red from crying, and her usually perfect appearance was disheveled. "I need to know everything," she said without preamble. I showed her the evidence I'd collected, the the hotel receipts, the restaurant charges, the timeline of lies that Nola had told both of us. Raina studied each document with the focused intensity of someone trying to understand how her entire life had been built on deception. 6 months, she said finally. They've been doing this for at least 6 months. Probably longer, I said gently. I only started paying attention recently. Raina's laugh was bitter. I was so stupid. All those late nights Owen claimed were work meetings. All those business trips. And Nola, God, she was my best friend. I told her everything about my marriage, my problems with Owen, and she was sleeping with him the entire time. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Raina was collateral damage in Nola's war against me, an innocent victim who didn't deserve any of this. Don't be sorry, Raina said, her voice hardening. Be ready to fight, because if I know Owen, he's going to try to blame this entire thing on you somehow. He'll say you're lying, that you're making things up because you're bitter about the divorce. She was right. I'd underestimated the secondary battle that was about to unfold. It wasn't just about my divorce from Nola anymore. It was about Owen and Raina's marriage, and the social dynamics of an entire friend group that was about to implode. What are you going to do? I asked. I'm going to destroy him, Raina said matter-of-factly. Legally, financially, socially. Owen thinks he's smarter than everyone else, but he made one crucial mistake. Which is? He left a paper trail. And unlike your wife, I actually pay attention to our finances. Over the next week, the social battlefield became increasingly chaotic. Nola's friend group, which had been so supportive during that speakerphone call, began to fracture along predictable lines. Tara, whose own divorce had made her sympathetic to cheating spouses, initially tried to defend Nola. But when the evidence became undeniable, she switched sides with the opportunistic speed of someone who'd always been more interested in drama than loyalty. Jade, the social media manager, saw the entire situation as content for her various platforms. She began posting cryptic messages about fake friends and betrayal, clearly positioning herself as an innocent bystander who'd been deceived along with everyone else. But the real prize was watching Nola's professional reputation crumble. Her nonprofit work had always been built on personal relationships and community trust. When word spread that she'd been conducting an affair with a married man, a man who was married to her best friend, the donations and volunteer support began to dry up. Emily, who had connections throughout the Minneapolis business community, made sure the story reached the right ears. Not through gossip or rumors, but through carefully placed conversations with people who mattered. Nola's boss called her in for a meeting yesterday, Emily reported during one of our regular coffee sessions. Apparently several major donors have expressed concerns about her judgment and character. Good, I said, though part of me felt guilty about the collateral damage. Nola's job had been important to her, and watching her professional life collapse was almost too much revenge. Almost. Don't feel bad, Emily said, reading my expression. She did this to herself. Every choice, every lie, every betrayal. That was all her. The legal proceedings were moving forward simultaneously. Sarah Martinez, my lawyer, was building a case that would ensure Nola got far less than the half of everything she'd demanded. The adultery gives us significant leverage, Sarah explained during one of our strategy sessions. But the financial deception is even better. She's been using marital assets to fund her affair, hotel rooms, dinners, gifts. That's dissipation of marital property, and it can be used to reduce her share of the settlement. How much are we talking about? Instead of half, she's looking at maybe 30%, and that's if she doesn't fight us in court. If this goes to trial, with all the evidence we have, she could end up with even less. The custody battle was even more one-sided. Milo, who was 12 and old enough to have opinions about his living situation, had made it clear that he wanted to stay with me. Nola's affair, combined with her frequent absences and her obvious prioritization of her social life over her family responsibilities, made her case for primary custody extremely weak. But the most satisfying development was watching Owen's world fall apart in parallel to Nola's. Raina had followed through on her promise to destroy him. She'd hired a forensic accountant who discovered that Owen had been using business funds to pay for his affair, a fact that not only strengthened her divorce case, but also created potential criminal liability for embezzlement. His tech consulting business, which had been built largely on personal relationships and referrals, was collapsing as word spread about his character issues. Clients were terminating contracts, partners were distancing themselves, and his professional reputation was in ruins. Karma's a snake, Emily observed when we heard that Owen had been forced to declare bankruptcy. No, I corrected. Raina's a snake. Karma is just her weapon of choice. The social dynamics were the most interesting part to watch. Nola and Owen's affair had created a ripple effect that destroyed multiple relationships and friendships. People were forced to choose sides, and the sides were clear. You were either with the cheaters or with the victims. Most chose the victims. Nola found herself increasingly isolated. Her friends, who had been so supportive during that disastrous phone call, began to distance themselves as the full scope of her deception became clear. The wine nights stopped. The group text messages went quiet. The social circle that had been the center of her life simply evaporated. She tried to fight back, of course. Nola hired her own lawyer and attempted to portray herself as the victim of a vindictive husband who was using her personal mistakes to destroy her life. But the evidence was too overwhelming, and her credibility was too damaged. The final blow came when Milo, in a conversation with the court-appointed custody evaluator, described his mother as someone who lies a lot and is never home anyway. Out of the mouths of babes. 3 months after that speakerphone call, Nola's carefully planned life had completely collapsed. Her marriage was over, her affair was public knowledge, her professional reputation was destroyed, her friendships were ruined, and her relationship with her son was severely damaged. She'd wanted half of everything. Instead, she'd lost everything. But I wasn't done yet. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I thought the war was over. Nola had moved to a small apartment across town, her settlement had been reduced to 25% of our marital assets, and I had primary custody of Milo. Owen had declared bankruptcy and moved back to his parents' house in Wisconsin. Raina had taken him for everything he had left and was rebuilding her life with a vindictive satisfaction that was beautiful to watch. Justice had been served, and I was ready to move on with my life. But Nola had other plans. It started with small things. Milo would come home from his weekend visits with his mother and mention strange conversations. Nola had been asking him questions about my work, my finances, my relationship with Emily. She wanted to know if I was dating anyone, if I'd made any major purchases, if I seemed happy. She keeps saying that Dad got lucky, Milo told me after one particularly uncomfortable visit. She says that smart people like her don't usually lose to boring people like you. The comment stung, but it also worried me. Nola wasn't accepting defeat gracefully. She was planning something, Emily agreed. She's fishing for information. The question is why. We got our answer 2 weeks later when I received a certified letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. Nola was suing me for defamation, claiming that I'd deliberately spread false information about her affair in order to damage her reputation and career. She's claiming that you made everything up, Sarah Martinez explained when I brought her the lawsuit. The hotel receipts, the financial records, the timeline. She's saying it was all fabricated as part of a scheme to destroy her life. But we have evidence. Documentation, witnesses. We do. But she's betting that you'll settle rather than go through the public humiliation of a trial. She's also hoping that enough time has passed for people to start questioning the narrative. It was a desperate move, but it was also dangerous. If Nola could convince a jury that I'd fabricated evidence of her affair, she could potentially overturn the divorce settlement and demand a new custody arrangement. More importantly, she could destroy my reputation and career in the process. What are our options? I asked. We fight, Sarah said simply, and we fight dirty. The defamation trial was scheduled for early December, almost exactly 1 year after that fateful speaker phone call. In the weeks leading up to it, Nola's legal team tried every trick they could think of to discredit my evidence and my character. They subpoenaed my work records, looking for any sign of professional misconduct. They interviewed my coworkers, trying to find someone who would testify that I was vindictive or dishonest. They even attempted to paint my friendship with Emily as evidence of an affair of my own. None of it worked. My work record was spotless, so 12 years of consistent performance, ethical behavior, and professional recognition. My coworkers, when interviewed, described me as reliable, honest, and fair. And Emily, when questioned about our relationship, provided such a devastating critique of their insinuation that their lawyer actually apologized. But Nola's team had one more card to play, and it was a dangerous one. 3 days before the trial was set to begin, they filed a motion claiming that I had illegally recorded the speaker phone call without Nola's consent. If they could get that recording thrown out, they could eliminate the most damning piece of evidence against her. It's a Hail Mary, Sarah explained. Minnesota is a one-party consent state, so the recording is legal. But they're hoping the judge doesn't understand the law or that they can create enough confusion to muddy the waters. The hearing on the motion was held on a cold Monday morning in December. I sat in the courtroom, watching Nola's lawyer argue that my recording of the phone call was a violation of privacy and should be excluded from evidence. Nola sat at the plaintiff's table, looking confident for the first time in months. She'd lost weight, changed her hair, and was wearing a conservative business suit that was clearly chosen to make her appear sympathetic and professional. But when Sarah stood up to respond, I knew we had won. Your Honor, she began, the defendant's motion is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of Minnesota law. This is a one-party consent state. which means that any party to a conversation can legally record that conversation without the knowledge or consent of the other parties. She paused, looking directly at Nola. But more importantly, the plaintiff's motion ignores the crucial fact that she placed this call on speakerphone in a room full of witnesses, with the clear intention of making her statements public. You cannot claim privacy for a conversation that you deliberately made public. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. The recording was admissible, and the trial would proceed as scheduled. Nola's confident expression crumbled. The trial itself was a masterclass in legal destruction. Sarah methodically presented our evidence: the hotel receipts, the financial records, the witness testimony, and finally, the recording of that speaker phone call. When the jury heard Nola's voice, confidently announcing her intention to take half of everything, while her friends laughed in the background, followed by the devastating silence when I revealed her affair, the case was effectively over. Nola's testimony was a disaster. Under cross-examination, she was forced to admit to lie after lie. The hotel stays she'd claimed were work conferences. The dinners she'd said were donor meetings. The jewelry she'd insisted was a gift from a female friend. Each admission made her less credible, and by the time Sarah was finished with her, Nola looked like exactly what she was: a liar and a cheat who was trying to rewrite history to avoid the consequences of her actions. But the most devastating moment came when Sarah called Raina as a witness. Raina had rebuilt her life in the year since her divorce from Owen. She'd started her own business, moved to a new house, and found a confidence that had been missing during her marriage. When she took the stand, she was calm, composed, and absolutely lethal. "Mrs. Favren," Sarah began, "how long were you friends with the plaintiff?" 8 years, Raina replied. "I considered her my best friend." "And during that time, did she ever mention having marital problems?" "Constantly. She would complain about Grant, about his job, his personality, his lack of ambition. She said she felt trapped and unfulfilled." "Did she ever mention considering divorce?" "Yes. She asked me about my lawyer, about property division, about custody arrangements. She said she was thinking about her options." Sarah paused, letting that sink in. "Mrs. Favren, did you know that the plaintiff was having an affair with your husband?" Raina's composure never wavered. "No, I had no idea. While she was asking me for advice about her marriage, while she was complaining about feeling trapped, she was sleeping with my husband. She betrayed both of us." The jury was riveted. Here was a woman who had been victimized by Nola's deception, speaking with calm authority about the plaintiff's character and credibility. "In your opinion," Sarah continued, "is the plaintiff someone who tells the truth?" Nola's lawyer objected, but the judge allowed the question. "No," Raina said simply. "She's someone who lies to get what she wants, regardless of who gets hurt in the process." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They found in my favor on all counts, awarding me damages for legal fees and court costs. More importantly, they issued a public judgment that Nola's claims were false and malicious. But the real victory wasn't the money or the legal vindication. It was watching Nola's final gambit fail spectacularly, leaving her with no options left except to accept the reality of her situation. As we left the courthouse, Emily walked beside me, grinning with satisfaction. "How does it feel?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment. A year ago, I'd been a passive husband who accepted his wife's disrespect and planned destruction. Today, I was a man who had fought back and won, who had protected his assets and his son, who had exposed the truth and seen justice done. "It feels," I said finally, "like I got my life back." Nola never appealed the judgment. She couldn't afford to, financially or emotionally. She moved to another state 6 months later, ostensibly for a new job, but really to escape the social consequences of her actions. Milo visits her twice a year during school breaks. Their relationship is cordial but distant, the natural result of a mother who chose her own desires over her son's well-being. Owen never recovered from his bankruptcy and disgrace. Last I heard, he was working as a night manager at a retail store, living in a studio apartment, and driving a 15-year-old Honda Civic. Raina thrived. Her business grew, her confidence soared, and she eventually remarried, a widower with 2 children who appreciated her strength and loyalty. Emily and I remained close friends, bonded by the shared experience of warfare and victory. She was promoted to head of HR, partly based on the strategic thinking she'd demonstrated during my crisis. And me? I got exactly what Nola had accused me of wanting: a stable, peaceful life. I kept my job, raised my son, and learned to appreciate the value of being underestimated. Sometimes the boring guy wins, sometimes half a life is better than a whole lie, and sometimes the person who thinks they're taking everything ends up with nothing at all. Nola had called our marriage a half-life, something incomplete and slowly decaying. But she was wrong about which one of us was radioactive. In the end, she was the one who destroyed everything she touched, including herself.